Hey, what are you doing here? I'm not about to eat your snacks, but I'm about to do that review. Oh no, you're not! Oh boy. Hello one, hello all, it's the gothiest ghost of them all, Casper in the flesh, and it's time for a review of High on Fire, Cometh the Storm. High on Fire, legendary stoner metal rock sludge band, are back, and they are definitely kicking ass once again this time around. It's been 5 years since we've heard from them. We last heard from them on Electric Messiah, which was a Grammy Award-winning album, but unfortunately didn't really do too much for me. Not a terrible album, but definitely a lot of tracks on there that I found a bit to be lackluster or painting themselves into a corner. And I do want to apologize a little bit because I am still maybe a little under the weather, but you know what? The show must go on. And if I could dive in a little bit into their back catalog, I would say they have put out fantastic albums in the past, such as the lighter and melodic, but still kick-ass Snakes for the Divine, or the very crushing, abrasive De Vermis Mysterious, hope I'm saying that right, or also their very anthemic Luminiferous. And now we have Cometh the Storm, which has elements that remind me of another great album in their catalog, Death is This Communion, that had tribal-like themes, war-like themes, very heavy, but this time I would say they're a little more expansive this time around. They're still keeping their aggression and they're still keeping their fire. And speaking of fiery, Matt's vocals. Oh my god. They are absolutely jaw-dropping here, even more than usual, with how infuriated, anguished they sound. Like, this guy sounds pissed off, with these impassioned screams that sound like he's going Super Saiyan on these tracks. And with the ominous guitar chords, I feel like the ground is gonna start shaking, and I'm gonna have to just grab my dog and just run for cover. And the hook on the opener is very large, it's very foreboding. And towards the end of this track, we get a Middle Eastern outro, and it seems to me that the Middle Eastern instrumentation does play a role in this album, which we will get into. And if you listen closely, the guitars here definitely emulate that style without going too far out of its wheelhouse. But the thing is, it doesn't really become very apparent until the end of the track. While you hear the very sweltering, the very entrancing instrumentation, you also get the fiery guitar solo at the end. And I feel things take a more chunky, doomy turn on the following track, with the searing guitar harmonies, driving grooves, but also incorporate like a head bob too. And something about the way the riffs linger and how crunchy the guitars are, it creates like a very smoky atmosphere. Which, reading into the lyrics here, they're calling out these scumbag billionaires going against capitalism, who have all the money in the world, and then ask the working class to donate to them. And as I alluded to earlier, on this track you get Matt's very elongated, very impassioned pain screams on this track, over these descending dark riffs, into these galloping leads. And the title track, which I wasn't too crazy about at first, more for the vocal effects on Matt's vocals, but probably has the catchiest hook on here. Cometh the Storm! And the rumbling drums, the thrash grooves here are great. I love the way they go back and forth. And leading into that, we get this fantastic Balkan interlude. It's very hypnotic, it's very alluring, with these beautiful but also chilling ghostly vocals. And I love how the strings rise and create this sense of epicness without sounding cheesy. And while not a visceral track, you could hear the slapping, you could hear the passion that is put into the instrumentation without really sounding too visceral. It's quite interesting. So yeah, the first leg of this album, pretty flawless, actually very flawless. And I would say, with the exception of a few tracks, it's pretty much a solid last leg of the album. And it's really hard for me to choose out of all these which is my favorite, because so many of these tracks have like a lot of variation to them. The track Sal's Golden Curse, which is pretty Sabbath coded, but in a great way. But maybe more stoner, maybe more sludgy, with how heavy and crunchy the guitars are, with all the distortion. And the way the guitars arpeggiate, the way they rev with the drum rolls is fantastic. And the way the guitars blaze through on the back end is stellar, with Matt's layered chants giving it an almost battle cry feel. and you add that to the intensity, to Matt's blood-curdling screams at the end, it just adds so much intensity to the track. And the beating, which is the most high-octane track on this album. And with Matt's sped-up shouted vocals, and the guitars winding with the rapid drum hits, it almost feels punky, and with the detuned riffs on here, in a way, it kind of feels mathy. And I would say Lightning Beard is probably more thrashy on this album. But man, the fat bassy grooves with the speedy distorted riffs and a lot of intensity, it's actually very dizzying, honestly. And honestly very overwhelming. Now this is not boring by any stretch of the imagination, but it'll certainly tire you out in a good way. I do wish the ending though was a bit stronger. And I've loved Matt singing throughout the majority of his career. But the vocals here do sound a bit silly. And the closer, being the longest song of this album, kinda drags, doesn't really give me the epic ending or anything memorable melodically that I could pull from. It really doesn't give you that epic finish which you've expected to get from a High on Fire track, and kinda gave me deja vu of a lackluster track of Electric Messiah. But overall, I think this is a great album. I think this is a great comeback album, and definitely blows Electric Messiah out of the water. With how crushing it is, how risk-taking it is, how various in sound it is and style, and how raw, aggressive, and how anguished the vocals and the playing is on this album, while still giving you a little bit of everything. I'm feeling a 4 out of 5 Black Hearts on this album. If you've given this a listen, what did you think of it? Did you love it? Did you hate it? Why? And that's it. Caspa, Gothic Ghost, High on Fire, Cometh the Storm. Till we meet again.